Okay, yeah. So we're still in the middle of chapter 12 that speaks about the Benoni and how we, each and every one of us, can achieve that status. Benoni is a person who's in full control of his animal soul, even though his animal soul is still very much alive. It's not dormant as it is in the tzaddik, as we mentioned. And there are times in which the Benoni, like the times in which we read the Shema, for example, as we said, in which the Benoni is not only just in full control of his animal soul, but he reaches a point, almost like the tzaddik, where the animal soul doesn't even speak to him anymore. See, for the Benoni, the animal soul still has a say, but he's in control of that say. During times like the Shema, the Benoni elevates himself to a place where he doesn't speak to you anymore. It's almost like, if I may use the metaphor, it's almost like if I mature, then the game of marbles doesn't speak to me anymore. Even though I used to love the game when I was 9 years old. It still exists, but it's not on my level of consciousness. The same year, there are times in which the Benoni is so elevated that he's almost like the tzaddik. And therefore, the animal soul has no say, is almost dormant like it is in the tzaddik. But most of the time, it's not like that. Most of the time, it's a constant struggle, and it's a struggle like that for the rest of his life. But he's able, again, to conquer the animal soul each and every time. Okay, so that's the big idea. And speaking of such times, let's continue here on page 293. Does anyone want to read? At such time, when a person achieves. Anyone?
I'll read if nobody else wants to.
Okay, thank you, Margot.
Okay. At such time, when a person achieves the full arousal of his godly soul's perceptive and emotive powers, the evil that is the left ventricle is subdued and nullified by the good that is diffused in the right ventricle from the Chabad in the brain, which are bound to the greatness of the blessed infinite. In chapter 9, the author described the process by which the godly soul's love for God is stimulated to the point that it spills over into the left ventricle of the heart, transforming the animal soul's passion into a love for God. In the tzaddik, this process has been completed and is now the permanent state of affairs. The Benoni achieves this only in special times, such as during the prayer.
Right, just one more paragraph and then we'll explain.
Okay. At such times, the rule of the Benoni over the evil in the left ventricle of his heart is not merely external, through control of his actions, speech, and conscious thoughts, but involves the entire soul, alive and ardent in striving for the divine. So the Benoni can, at specific times, love God with all his heart. At such times, the passions of the other element in his soul are stilled, and he has no wish or desire other than to give himself completely over to his creator and pour out his soul to God.
Right. So just to explain here, the Tanya spoke before about how the animal soul and the godly soul really dwell in two separate parts of the body. The godly soul is on the right side. The animal soul is by the heart, where all the desires are. And that's where it dwells. Now, the Benoni has this constant struggle between the left side and the right side, to put it like that. The tzaddik, on the other hand, has been able to conquer his left side, to conquer the animal soul that dwells in his left side. That really he has no left side, or has no animal soul in that left side, and the godly soul really permeated both of his sides. By the Benoni, that permeation of both sides by the godly soul does not really exist. It only exists, as we mentioned, during specific times where the godly soul spills over and, in a way, anesthetizes, maybe that's the word, to the animal soul, puts it to sleep completely. And that's, again, during times of prayer. But just to put this in very practical terms, or in very relatable terms, I would say that we all experience that. Think about Yom Kippur, for example. I'm sure during Yom Kippur, we have moments in which we are so elevated, so spiritual, that we don't feel our animal soul. All the trivialities of this world don't speak to us anymore. Sometimes people speak of moments like that when they go to the Kotel, right? When you go to the Western Wall and you put your hand there on the wall, you feel all elevated. And sometimes it's during the birth of a child, or during moments that are usually very holy moments in life. We feel that the godly soul now is completely permeating the left side and the animal soul, and therefore it doesn't exist at that moment. For the tzaddik, he's able to maintain that. For the Benoni, it only happens sporadically again during those elevated moments. But I would say, and again, to put this in a very practical way, I would say again that the goal of every single one of us is to try and have more and more of those moments every week or every day, so that slowly but surely the godly soul is not only fully in control of the animal soul on the left, but it's also slowly but surely permeating that area. Can we achieve a complete permeation of that area? No, because we can't achieve the status of tzaddik. But we should try and create those moments every day. So on a practical level, I know we can bring the Western wall to our homes, if that's what creates those moments for us. I know that we can't have Yom Kippur every day or whatever else, but what we can do is pick 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour a day in which we do create those moments. We divorce ourselves from this world. And for example, we launch ourselves in the pages of the Talmud or whatever else you wish to study. And that, in a way, elevates you to that level where the godly soul permeates the side of the animal soul. So it's creating moments like that, sanctuaries like that, so to speak, each and every moment for the godly soul to really not just be in control, but to, in a way, invade and completely permeate that left side. So that's to make it as practical as possible. I will say this, that I think it's interesting because, we're speaking about the Shema, but it's not for nothing. Just think about this, that as the Tanya mentions here, that the Benoni experienced this, what we're speaking about during the Shema, because the Shema, in essence, what does the word Shema mean? Shema means hear, listen, right? Shema Israel, hear, O Israel, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. But on a deeper level, these moments can be created when we are completely separated from our ego, and we start listening to what is required of us, to that greater calling, not to what we want of us, but maybe to what God wants of us, as we've mentioned before, to what our greater calling is. If we can be Shema, if we can be listening to that soul, to that purpose, then we can create moments like this. And that's why, again, these moments occur during the Shema, because during the Shema, that's the moment of listening. That's the moment in which we say, okay, we're above this world, we're above our ego, and we're now aligned with God so that we can listen to him. And that's when, again, that permeation happens. But it has to include the element of the Shema. So every time we follow that greater calling and we act upon our divine purpose and not just our immediate and animalistic needs, then we are enabling that godly soul to invade the left side and eventually also the animal soul. But it all depends, again, on the Shema. And that's why, again, the Benoni experiences this during the Shema. That's the moment of listening to the greater call and heeding it. It's not during other parts of the prayer, because Shema, again, embodies that moment, that Western wall moment, if you want to call it like that, more than anything else. It starts with the ears. I would put it that way. Starts with your listening. Not so much with your seeing, and certainly not with the other senses, your touching, or starts with the hearing. Okay, let's continue, but please feel free to share your comments and disagreements and so on. You can unmute yourself if you want, but okay, otherwise we'll continue. Bottom of page 293.
Okay. Yet the Benoni is no tzaddik. After prayer, when the state of ascendancy of the intellect of the blessed infinite departs, then the ascendancy of the mind over the heart within the Benoni's person is likewise diminished. The evil in the left ventricle reawakens, and the Benoni experiences desires for the lusts of the material world and its pleasures. When the time of prayer and the distinct spiritual opportunity it represents is over, the Benoni again becomes like everyone else. Again, the Benoni is tempted by worldly pleasures, each according to his tastes, the nature of his animal soul, and the manner in which it reacts to the material world. The time of prayer was a time of slumber and submission for the evil within, a submission that bespeaks not an absolute negation, not an essential transformation, but only a temporary departure. So immediately after prayers, the Benoni reverts to his previous state, and the evil within again rises against the good.
Right. And I would say that that's what is really the most difficult for the Benoni. These moments of high and then the moments of low that follow, they inevitably follow. Because again, he's a Benoni. He hasn't completely conquered the animal soul to the point that he's expelled it or at least made it dormant. So he experiences Western wall moments, like we call them, but then he has to go back to real life, and then experiences them again and goes back to real life. And that movement for the Benoni is draining. It's exhausting. But in many ways, it's part of his Shema, of his calling, to be able to come back to those moments and then exercise his calling in those moments, even in the face of challenges. And I would say that I think that even though the Shema moments, the Western wall moments may feel good, but the real achievement of the Benoni and the real, I would say, connection to God of the Benoni is specifically during those low moments, because that's when he can prove that those high moments made an impact. It's true for every one of us, right? I think we've spoken about this too. It's easy to fly into an emotion. It's easy to fly into Yom Kippur. What happens the day after Yom Kippur? Have we changed? Did we take those high moments and translate them here below? If we have, then we've proven to God, then that connection with God is really deepened. Then we've achieved something. And that's true for the Benoni. Every day, the Benoni should have moments like that, whether it's during the Shema or moments that he himself creates. But what happens afterwards? And that's the big question. You know, I don't know if we've ever mentioned this, but the Kotzker Rebbe speaks about, who was, as we said, a seeker of truth and very harsh sometimes. But he speaks about that prayer of Yishtabach, right? And that prayer of Yishtabach concludes with the blessing of Baruch Atah Hashem, Abocher B'Shirei Zimra, that God chooses the songs of our melodies, Shirei Zimra. And he would say, no, that's not really what it means. Bocher B'Shirei Zimra can be read as a Bocher B'Shiyarei Zimra, which means that God chooses the leftovers of our melodies, not the songs. What's left over after we've sung? That we really change. And if we did, then God says, okay, I'll choose you. That's what I'm looking for. So it's specifically those, even though the high moments may feel better, it's the low moments that prove really a depth of connection with God. And it's true in life. We have very many high moments. So what happens the day after? I was just telling that to the bride and the groom here. We celebrated Baruch Hashem many simchas yesterday, but two marriages. There were two brides and grooms, and now they're celebrating the chuppah. Today there's a chuppah, but there was another bride and groom, the Sheva Brachot, the 7 days that follow the chuppah, in which they continue to celebrate their marriage every day. But the question is, what happens on the 8th day? What happens the day after the wedding, or the month after the wedding? Can we maintain that high? Or can we take all of the joy and the love that we experience into the bill paying, the diaper changing? That's the big question. In many ways, the Benoni is to experience this every single day. He has high moments. But what happens afterwards? That's really the biggest question. But the Benoni is able to, and that's what proves to us whether we Benonis or not, whether we can be a Benoni for the day or not, is whether we can translate the highs into the lows of life and maintain that connection and even deepen it. That's the idea here.
Hopefully they have 9 months to prepare for the diaper change.
That's right, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Right. There's a question here on the chat regarding the Shema. So the Shema tends to sneak up on me during the prayer service. The run up to the Shema is a very different run up to the Amida, no Kaddish before, etc. Can you comment on preparing oneself for the Shema during the Shacharit and Arvit? So during the Arvit, it runs up on us much quicker. During the Shacharit, we actually have what's called Brachot Lifnei Kriyat Shema, the blessings before the Shema. And that's when we say the Yotzer HaMeorot blessing and also Abocher Ba'amo Yisrael Be'ahava blessing. These two blessings are the blessings that are there to prepare us for the Shema. In fact, it's interesting because specifically those blessings are the hike, the climb to the peak of the Shema. Why? Because they speak about that love that we have for God that makes us into vessels of listening, vessels of Shema. And that's really, I know these blessings are sometimes overlooked or maybe not emphasized enough, but they really transform, they soften our hearts and transform us into listening vessels. So I would encourage everyone to really focus on those two blessings before the Shema, because that's the best preparation. That's for the Shacharit. For the Arvit, we also have two blessings. They're much, much shorter, but we have Amariv Aravim, and we have also Ohev Israel. It's again speaking about our relationship with God and how much He loves us and we love Him. So those two blessings also prepare us for the Shema. But look, I also had a question last week that many people, and it's true for me too, I'll confess that many people, it's hard. It's hard to sit down and pray and focus all the time. And then when the Shema comes, maybe our mind is now thinking about, I don't know, upcoming plan for the day. Or maybe worse, it's thinking about the UFC fight of last night, or it's thinking about other things, because that's what minds do. They run in all sorts of different places. So how can we be experiencing what the Beinoni should be experiencing during the Shema when our mind is not there? That's an excellent question, but I think there are a few methods. Rabbi Steinzer speaks about it in the 13 Petal Rows, in the chapter called Prayer, where he actually gives us methods on how to keep our minds straight. The method number one is to focus on the words, to really read the words, to be with a Siddur. Just the eye locking into the letters helps the concentration. That's number one. Method number two is preparing ourselves before prayer, studying before prayer like we're doing now. That in of itself divorces us from this world, elevates us to a level in which the world doesn't speak to us anymore, and then we won't be speaking about the bills that we just paid or the meeting that we're about to have. So it's really learning before prayer and contemplating the greatness of God. It's method number two. Method number three is repeating the words. You repeat some words. If you feel like, oh gosh, I need to focus more on these words, so you repeat them. Repeat the verse time and time again. The repetition of the words then creates concentration for the words. That's another method. And by the way, these methods are age-old. They've been in existence for many, many, many years. The Talmud speaks about some of them. And then method number four, and there are other methods, but I'll stop here, is that if we feel like we're not there and that we've already said so much of the prayer, the Chafetz Chaim says this, Rabbi Yisrael Kogan. I don't know if I like the metaphor so much, but I'm going to quote his words. And that is that, you know, when a thief enters a home, he has to act quickly. But he acts the most quickly when, at the very end, when he hears that the owner of the house is on his way back. Then he has to just take as much as he can and run out with as quickly as possible, because the owner of the house is going to come and catch him. So sometimes we're at the end of the Shema prayer, with the end of the Amidah, and we say, gosh, we don't hear anything. So instead of regretting what you did not do this whole time, like the thief who may be regretting what he did not do this whole time, then at least act now and focus at the end of the prayer and do as much as you can now before the Amidah is over or before the Shema is over. That yet is another method right? The Chafetz Chaim. So when you catch yourself, in other words, when you catch yourself not wandering with your mind all over the place, then you say, okay, fine. My mind may have missed these prayers, but at least now, before the Amidah is over, or before the Shema, or before the prayer altogether is over, I'll focus on what I can. The first three are preventative methods. The fourth method here is a method in action. And not necessarily preventative. But anyway, it happens to the best of us. We don't have to also be despondent because it happens to us. It's the human mind. It's the human condition. It's the human nature. Our minds wander. Doctors would know this here, but how many thoughts do we think a day? I think there's thousands and thousands of thoughts that cross our minds a day. So it's normal. But that's part of the exercise of prayer, to be able to focus our minds on God and God alone, without any distractions. By the way, that I think helps tremendously. Any person who's able to do that, it helps him navigate the day thereafter. But going back again to the Beinoni has the ability to translate those highs into lows. In many ways, it reminds me of the interpretation of the Baal Shem Tov, and we'll conclude with that, the interpretation of the Baal Shem Tov to the verse in the book of Psalms of Shiviti Hashem le'negdi tamid, which is, by the way, a verse that many shuls have engraved on their ark. Shiviti Hashem le'negdi tamid, which means that I have made God equal in front of my eyes, always. God is equal to me. What does this mean? What really this means is that my connection with God is equal, is as intense in the high moments as it is in the low moments. My connection with God doesn't change based on my moods, or based on the challenges, based on the highs and the lows. It's equal all the time. That's a level that the Beinoni has. It's not easy to feel God and to be as connected to God when I'm in the middle of a challenge, or when I have to pay a bill, and I'm not praying the Shema. It's not easy. But in many ways, it's achievable. And we can achieve that. And again, not only will the godly soul control the animal soul, but will also slowly but surely permeate that side, and eventually maybe conquer it altogether.